Hello, and welcome to another event brought to you by IPN. You know, I always say IPN is such a great platform for networking, for learning, for sharing, for collaborating and building capacity. And in my conversations, I often mention how if you look at any occupation, you look at any industry, and a smiley is atop that industry. Today is no exception. Our speaker is a pioneer not only within her community, but within her industry. And I'd like to thank Aurusa for sharing her story with us today. I hope that you are as inspired as our team was when we heard her story. And I hope that it inspires you to pursue your passions. As you go through that journey, remember, IPN is here for you. Whether it's career services, networking, or mentoring, IPN is committed to Ismaili students, Ismaili professionals, and Ismaili executives, connecting, collaborating, and contributing. Lastly, I'd like to thank all those responsible for today's event, and I'd like to thank you for attending. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Samir. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Shaji Adam, and for today on Ismaili Professionals Network, yes, we do have a very special guest. Just to give you a little background on her, she went to University of Texas in Austin, got degrees in both government and international relations. And then after that, she had an internship in Pakistan. But then she decided to attend Marquette University Law School, but she still really wanted to explore her passion for collegiate athletics. But in law school, she got to travel to Cayman Islands and then Argentina. And she was the managing editor of the Marquette Sports Law Review and graduated with a sports law certificate. After that, she joined the Orlando Magic NBA team as a legal services intern for approximately a year, but she wasn't done yet before she joined the Orlando City Soccer Club. And Aurusa currently serves as Director of Legal Affairs for the Orlando City SC MLS team and Orlando Pride NWSL team. And I'd like to bring her in now, Aurusa Kabani. Thank you so much for joining us today. If we had a live audience, I'm pretty sure you would get like a very loud applause because you deserve it.
I am really excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And more importantly, like before we begin, I just want to say thank you to the IPN team, especially IPN Florida, for putting this together, for giving me the platform to really share my story. I want to thank the aunties that in Ncaa that were always praying for us and really hoping that we'd get here someday and make them proud. Here we did it. To all of our friends and families joining in, if you take away anything from today's conversation, know that IPN is here, professionals are here, and believe in your dreams. You can achieve it too.
Yeah, absolutely. You have done that. You were obviously very hardworking, and you absolutely deserved everything you've gotten so far. But I read your resume, and it's incredible. One of the best things I've ever read. Always shocked by it. But we got to go back. There's always a beginning to such an amazing story. So how did you find law? Where did you find out law was for you?
I didn't find law right away. I actually found Grey's Anatomy quicker than I did find law. My mom and my brother always told me that we need a doctor in the household. We need someone to provide free medical care. We just need someone to be there for emergency services. And they had this dream that I would become a doctor for a very long time. So since 2006, I've been a regular weekly watcher of Grey's Anatomy and had pursued my own dream of becoming the next McDreamy. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. My mom paraded the idea in Jamaat, kind of saying, my Betsy will offer free healthcare to everybody. And that was just her narrative. It was her dream for me, and I believed in it too. For a very long time, I went to the University of Texas with a hope to become a doctor and started my degree in biology. And it wasn't until I hit organic chemistry, the second one, not even the first one, when I realized that I couldn't do it. It was the first time I'd brought in home a score or a grade that was not up to par. And when I say not up to par, it wasn't a 93 and I should have gotten 100. It was an F. I had failed a class, and that's not easy in the society and culture we're raised in, to even feel comfortable bringing that home. I told my mom, and she said, it's okay, just take it again. I know you can do better. So I took it that summer, retook the class, and although I made an A, I had already decided that I wasn't going to pursue medicine. Instead, I studied abroad in Barcelona, and I took a class called Politics in Spain. Just to backtrack a little bit, the reason I even pursued the class was I was in high school, went to Trinity High School in Euless, Texas, and I was part of an IB program, and my geography teacher was adamant about me having to learn and read the news every day. He ingrained it into my lifestyle, but it provided me to become empathetic and to understand the world that's outside my nutshell. So I ended up deciding ultimately to study abroad in Barcelona to learn that piece, right? To become more empathetic and travel outside my horizon. And Barcelona did that for me. So in Barcelona, I saw and visited refugee camps, and I visited tunnels that were underground hiding spots for World War II. People who didn't want to be ultimately bombed and to seek shelter. And that's the first time where empathy hit me. And I said, I want to go into international relations of sorts. And I came back to University of Texas and changed my major.
Now, was there an aspect of UT and Marquette that really increased your passion for what you wanted to do besides classes?
Yes. So for sports in particular, my passion didn't really start in sports, nor did I ever dream of working in sports. The only sport that I grew up watching up until college almost was World Wrestling Entertainment. Like, I was a WWE fan. Friday Night SmackDown was my jam. So we still watch it as family. Part of the reason is WrestleMania happens on my birthday every year. So it is probably the only birthday wish I ever have is someone please take me to WrestleMania. But that was the only sport I watched. And it wasn't until I took a gap year between my college career and undergraduate, because I graduated not knowing what I wanted to be doing. I had switched my majors about 4 times in college, still graduated in 4 years, but I ultimately didn't know what I would want to pursue as a lifelong goal and or position. And so I took a gap year, and in that gap year, I went to Karachi, Pakistan for about 6 months. My brother lived there at the time, and he had kind of gotten me an internship in some capacity to kind of explore my passion for international relations, test the waters in government and see if it was for me. Ultimately, the two political systems are completely different. But it was during that journey when I really was exposed to more than just the United States, right? I was exposed to more than just I needed to have a specific path, or I needed to, if I became an attorney, I needed to become a immigration attorney. It opened my eyes, and it happened particularly when me and my brother were traveling across Southeast Asia for about 2 months. I just finished my internship, and we had some time, and so he's like, "Why don't we go on a world trip and see what happens?" If anyone gives me latitude to plan a trip, they know I'm going to nail it to a T, take advantage of it as much as I can. And so we actually ended up doing 3 weeks in China and another 5 weeks around Southeast Asia. It was inside China when I realized that I couldn't speak the language. There was a language barrier, and I couldn't communicate to even order food. Back in the day, Snapchat was a big deal. So the best way to order food was for me to take a picture of the menu, edit the picture a little bit, and then just show my server what I wanted to order. But it was in that dynamic of being in China, just visiting as a tourist, that I finally understood what a universal language was, right? I feel like we typically grow up thinking music is a universal language. It has the capabilities of bringing people together. However, in language, there's still a language barrier in music, right? I might be jamming out to Indian music. You might be jamming out to Latin music. We might not understand it. So we don't really understand the sentiments of it. But we were particularly in a hotel lobby when I realized that there was a Formula One going on in the background. And there was Australians next to us. There was people from Thailand next to us. I mean, none of us, I mean, yes, and obviously there's people from China and Shanghai in front of us, but none of us spoke a very similar language. There was a cultural difference between us. There was a language barrier between us. Yet there was a crash that happened on the screen, and all of us gasped. And it was the first time I realized sports is a universal language. It has the power to bring people together. It has the power to build empathy. If someone scores a game-winning three-pointer, buzzer beater, we're all cheering, right? And we don't have to go out and express the excitement. And that was the first time finally that it hit me that maybe I do want something in sports, because it has the ability of bringing humanity together.
And what is it about sports that you just saw was the best way to bring people together?
Yeah. If you take just this past year of the pandemic, we were without sports for 4 months. And during that 4-month period, it's kind of crazy to say, but people were losing their minds to a point, right? There was, but the minute sports came back in June, it felt like there was a sense of normalcy. Yes, we were still masking up. We weren't leaving home. But there was a sense of normalcy and a sense of comfort. And I get this question often, and I'm forced to reflect on it myself. And I really feel like sports has this way of being a constant, right? You don't know the end result, but you know how it's going to progress there, right? You know the steps of a game. The rules don't change wherever you are in the world. And there's a progression to it. And that sense of normalcy and comfort is what actually has the ability to bring people together. If you look at tragic events like 9/11, the first thing that happened after 9/11 was a moment of silence on a baseball pitch. It was the first thing. And it was a sense of, we can move on beyond this, right? We can resume our lives. And sports has the ability to do that. If you look at it today, sports is now a global platform. It's beyond just the athlete entertaining, right? It is now a social justice platform. And so I think it has a unique sense of bringing people together. To share a little insight, the only place before the North Korea and South Korea started establishing better relations over the past year, the only time the two would come together was in the Olympics. They actually compete as one team. And so to see that as a mechanism of even what we would think bitter rivals coming together, it's through sports.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I 100% agree with everything you just said. Now, looking back at your career so far, traveling is just such an important part of everything you've ever done. Would you have really been the same if you hadn't traveled to all the places you've been to?
Absolutely not. One, I'd be probably more boring, just blatantly honest. I wouldn't have, but I wouldn't have empathy. I feel like it's easy to pick up a news article and read it. It's hard to take away the tone that's behind that writer, right? I've always believed in telling your own story, but to be able to tell your own story, you have to understand where the story takes place. You have to understand the society those people live in, the culture they're raised in. And I am fortunate, and I would say honestly blessed, that my family and friends have always supported my last minute desires to take a trip, and say, hey, today we're going to go to Cuba, or how about next week? Are you free to go to Iceland? Right? Like it's always been at a tap of a finger, and I'm fortunate for it. But if you get the opportunity, if you're a student, I will always say, please study abroad. You can take the same classes abroad, and really learn a little bit more about who you are in the process.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to my next question. As a student, what is something that you wish people told you when you were a student? Is it that to do travel abroad as much as possible?
I wish someone would have told me it's okay to not know what is going to be your end vision. It's okay to walk in with the perspective of I'm going to be a doctor and walk out saying, I don't know what comes next. It's okay to find your own identity. I think we are kind of shelled into believing that you must be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, right? But a doctor, you could be a dermatologist. A lawyer, you can be a sports attorney. There's just so many different ways to have your own individual identity within something that's expected. But that also means that you can be something completely different, right? You can go into communications, you can work for the government, you can do a lot of that. And so I wish someone would have told me it's okay to not know and it's okay to change. And then, yes, again, I would have said, please study abroad.
Yeah, I agree so much with that first point. I relate to it because when I came into college for sports broadcasting, I only saw as one way, like, okay, if you want to go to the big networks, this is where you do it. But, I figured out that, oh no, you have to start slow. You have to go to local stuff. Then you got to slowly work your way up, and then you got to network and you got to do your internships. And you got to do all that just so you can get to your goal. But, everybody has a different path to where their destination is. And speaking of internships, what I just said, how important are internships? Because I read you did a lot of internships. Mm-hmm. How important is it for a student to do that?
Internships to me, I believe they're pivotal. I think education is something that comes with a desire to attend. I think the internships, you're kind of forced to put yourself out there. You have to earn them in a way, but they're also your practical experience, right? It's not easy. It's like finding a job almost, right? It's just as competitive to find an internship today. And I truly believe if it wasn't for my internships, I would not have the position and or even opportunity that I have today. To give you an example, once I left China, I had decided that I was going to go into sports. I couldn't be an agent, so decided to attend law school instead. And once I was at Marquette University, they specialize in sports law, but in particular. And when I say sports law, sports is just a subject. It is not a type of law. It is just like any contractual law. My subject is just sports, so a little easier to understand it. But as part of that program, I was required to do one internship. So I was like, I'm going to get this out of the way, one and done. Quickly, I realized it's not one and done. It's like 6 and maybe keep going. But I started with applying for an internship with the Ncaa. It was, I picked up my life, moved to Indianapolis for about 6 months. But the best part about it was I realized I couldn't do it forever. And I know that sounds really backwards, but I love the experience, have transferable skills that I can transfer to almost any industry. But there was a piece of that internship where it just didn't sit right with me. There was, and as many of you have probably had that, I apologize, I have a puppy in the background. If, as many of you have probably realized, when you do take an internship, you don't know what you're gonna learn. You don't know who you're gonna work with, but more importantly, you may not know the mission and or the belief behind the company. For me, while I respect the Ncaa, I had a personal struggle with one of their larger issues of student athletes, right? And so I knew I couldn't sit on that side of the table and be an enforcer of some of those rules. I didn't necessarily find them to be fair in the same way they probably believe in them. And everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I knew from that I couldn't join the Ncaa upon graduation. That led me to taking a second internship where I actually was working for the compliance department for a Division III collegiate program. Part of me wanted to see the opposite side of collegiate athletics, right? So if I didn't like the enforcement side of it or in the private equity side of it, I wanted to see what it was like to be defending the student athletes. That too wasn't for me. The day student athletes returned to campus and I lost my parking spot. I was not okay with walking half a mile to just get to work. And that to me was really, really important for me to quickly realize that I wasn't happy to see myself doing that in the future.
So yeah, once you find out that the NCAA internship just wasn't for you, you learned something from it, but not what you expected. Where did you go from here? Where did you decide to go next?
So this is a little interesting, but I actually was met the general counsel of the Orlando Magic through a networking event. She was in town to be a keynote speaker for one of the events at Marquette. And at Marquette, we're kind of required as a student to pick up our speakers from the airport. It forces you to have uncomfortable conversations pretty quickly and build a relationship. But upon my initial communication with her, I realized really quickly she has a love for travel. So I remembered it. And that evening there was a dinner and or banquet portion to the event. And her and I spent 3 hours together just chatting about our travels. She had just been to Iceland. I had booked a flight to Iceland, wanted to exchange itineraries, and we just kept going, right? And there was no conversation about what she does in her day job. There was no conversation of what I desire to be as a student. But that conversation followed up the next day, and I was sitting next to her when my professor came up to me and said, "Hey, Aurusa, I just got an email. There's an opportunity that's needed for a student associate in China. Can you take a look at your email?" So I looked at my email, and it basically said, it was from an Olympic arbitrator in China who said, "I need someone who can translate agreements, is willing to fly to China, and I need them to be here by Thursday." Mind you, this is a Sunday evening. So I called the Olympic arbitrator through WeChat because they don't have any other form of communication there. And he said, "Send me your resume. I'll call you back in a minute." He hung up, called me back a minute later, said, "Could you go to the embassy tomorrow morning? It's in Chicago. Drive there, figure out what paperwork you need, and I will see you on Thursday." And 4 days later, I was in China. As part of that, I was working for an Olympic arbitrator, but I was also serving as outside counsel, essentially, or outside student counsel, to the Chinese Soccer Federation, which is ultimately Team China's soccer team. While we were there, I had the opportunity to negotiate their coaching contract. And the coolest thing about the whole process was I was brought in to translate. So I started the document in English. We translated to Chinese. The Chinese side would make some edits. We translated back to English. I would add in some legal jargon. We then translated back to Chinese so they could confirm those changes, back to English. Then we'd send it over in English, where the other side would translate to Italian, because that was the coach at the time. And they do this process. We did this 8 times over the course of 8 weeks.
So simple.
Very simple. I actually sent in the submitting document on my flight home, back to Milwaukee. But it was a really cool process. And while I was there, I also got to engage with FIBA's player agents and kind of teach them player agent responsibilities and duties. Worked on China's anti-doping policy, which, as we know, in the Olympic business is very, very crucial. But it was a random opportunity that the general counsel of Orlando Magic said, "Hey, Aurusa, I don't know you. This sounds really crazy. We met last night, but I think you should take this opportunity and it will change your life." So you bet when I was there, the only person I kept talking to was her. And ultimately, by the end of those 8 weeks, she had become a mentor to me.
And I want to ask you, you had been to China before, when you did the social media thing, trying to order from menus on Snapchat. But now that you're there for an extended period of time on a job, how big of a culture shock was it for you?
It was still a huge culture shock. I think the hardest culture shock was telling my mom, "Hey, Mom, I'm leaving for 8 weeks. You will not be able to reach me by Facebook, Instagram. You won't be able to know what I'm watching and or reading. There's no Netflix. There's nothing. Please download the app called WeChat, and I will call you as often as I can." There was no Gmail, no Google Maps. And it was a unique opportunity. But I will say, if you've never been to China and get the opportunity to go to China, the best food is KFC and Pizza Hut. Haven't had it in America, by far, still fantastic. There's always a line out the door for those places. But it was a culture shock. I took a gut on my instinct and a little bit of comfort level that I had established the first time visiting, and just dove right in, hoping that at the end of it, I would elevate my career. Thankfully, while I was there was a massive conference between the United States government, or sports governing bodies, essentially, and the Chinese governing bodies. So I was able to connect with the COO of NFL Europe. I was able to connect with NBA China CEO. I was able to connect with US Soccer's president at the time. And that was all by chance, because I didn't speak the language, which actually hindered me in my earlier visits. The fact that I didn't speak Chinese and Mandarin, the second time, they thought I was a speaker too. So instead of being a student, I'm sitting in the back. They elevated me to VIP status, and I sat in the same room as them and was able to give them the opportunity to pick their brains.
And you were there for 8 weeks. So that 8 weeks is starting to wind down. Where do you go from next? I mean, you're in China, you've done so much. Where do you go from there?
So from there, I went back to law school. I was only a second-year law student at the time. I had another year to finish. But I left that internship knowing that's what I want to do, right? That's where I want to be. The first two internships told me exactly what I didn't want to do. And this one told me where I was good, where I truly woke up enjoying work. Those 8 weeks, I was working close to 70 to 80 hours a week. Are on the clock, as you know, being in sports as well. It's 24/7 job. Things change within seconds, and so, but I love that high intensity environment, and I knew I wanted to be there. So I came back. I continued taking classes at Marquette, and ultimately started applying for jobs. I wish someone would have told me, and if someone from Marquette's listening, and or if you're a law student wanting to enter sports, be open to an internship postgraduate. I and my family too believe that I was going to be an attorney upon graduation. There's a diploma privileged aspect to going to school in Wisconsin where we don't have to take the bar exam. We are licensed the day after we graduate. But I thought I'd be earning a high-end salary. So while I am applying for all these jobs, little did I know, one, they require lots of experience. So each starting job required 3 to 4 years of experience, which I could probably categorize all my internships into that, but that's not what they wanted. And so I started applying to postgraduate internships, which sounds silly as a attorney. One of the internships I applied to was the Orlando Magic, and lo and behold, I don't know if it was my relationship with Ncaa or that she had talked enough about me to her colleagues that they knew who I was when I started interviewing. We hit it off, and I was a good fit. And I ultimately ended up moving to Orlando after graduating to take an internship.
That's incredible that you did that internship. And what was that internship like for you? I'm pretty sure that was an amazing experience as well.
Yeah, it was. The way I like to explain sports in general, so as an industry, and I'm looking at professional sports only, there's a corporate America piece, which I would call the MLB, the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, and there's this startup vibe in the MLS, NWSL, cricket league, lacrosse, rugby. And I got the experience of a corporate America sports team. The Orlando Magic had existed for 60 years. They had already had an established way of doing and operating business. So before something had hit my desk, it was going to hit 3 other departments' desks, and then come to me. And I had a very templated task almost to get it to the finish line. And so it allowed me as an intern to really experience what corporate America could look like. So it was like my firm experience kind of, but it also taught me the need to have a efficient structure and efficient flow. I learned how to be very particular and very meticulous in my work product, to ultimately be a perfectionist in it, which no one wants to say that when they're an attorney because we're just reading all day. And so that just adds hours to my day. But it really taught me the grind before I could even connect over to the other side.
You know, one thing I'm a little curious about is being in the sports industry. How important is it to be really good at scheduling and just being on time? Like, how important is that?
It is very, very important. One, you can get fined and or penalized for not being on time. But when I'm talking about legal, there's multiple parties waiting on the other side, right? So my internal departments were waiting for me to get the job done so that they can go and send it back to their counterparts on the other side that they've been negotiating with, whether it's for marketing or for a sponsorship. If it's a sponsorship, there's money on the table. If it's marketing, there's a brand play on the table. So really understanding the identity behind or the necessity behind what I was doing really made me become timely. And the thing about sports is no 2 days are alike. So I might walk in with a to-do list of 10 things and I probably won't get to my first thing till 3 p.m. because 10 other things have already overpiled before then. But that's just the beauty of working in sports.
Yeah. And you were with the Magic for about a year, I believe. Mm-hmm. And now you're going to switch over to Major League Soccer. Tell me about that transition. What was that like? Did you plan to do it?
No, it was not planned. Although I will say, I think I forced it a little bit. Before I even joined the Magic, so my third year of law school, it's essential to start networking. Someone wise long time ago told me that your network is your net worth. So networking was huge. And thankfully around March of that year, I started reaching out outside of into sports and really any industry of sports. I reached out to the Greater Orlando Sports Commission to just have a conversation. And he said, Aurusa, I don't have a job for you, but I can connect you to 5 other people. One of the people he connected me with was the general counsel of Orlando City Soccer. I scheduled a conversation with him for about 45 minutes during my spring break. And he took my call and we ended up talking for an hour and 15. At the end of the conversation, I emailed him back and he said, here's my phone number, keep in touch. So we started texting. I was about to graduate and I didn't have a job lined up, but I had sustained this relationship for almost 2 months now. So I decided I was going to wing it and fly to Orlando to meet both Ncaa, who I was in the application process for the internship, and come out and meet him as well. I funded my own trip. I showed up and said, I'm here. Do you have some time to meet? I'm visiting family. And he basically said, sure, come on in. We have a game night today. Come a little early. We'll get a chat. I didn't know that chat was an interview. I showed up wearing a suit just in case. It was really hot in Florida, 100-degree weather that day. But I needed to make a first impression. We ended up chatting and he kind of left me alone and I watched the game by myself the rest of the day. I forwarding myself to a few weeks later, I got the offer for the Orlando Magic. However, instead of accepting the offer, when you don't have a job, you will take the first one. I said, please hold that thought. I'll call you back. And instead picked up the phone and called Orlando City Soccer and said, hey, I have an opportunity to move to Orlando from the Magic. I would be willing to leave that opportunity if you would give me a full-time offer, right? He didn't know at the time that it was an internship. But I said, they have an offer on the table. However, you and I have connected equally. Is there anything you can do for me? And he said, Aurusa, at this time, I do not have an offer. Even if I did, I don't know if I'd be able to offer it. But what I will say is take the opportunity with the Magic. If I need to, I can steal you later. You'll be closer in the area to take the opportunity. So my family thought I was probably really silly for taking the opportunity to become an intern with very little pay. and moved to Orlando. Ultimately, once I got here, I made it my goal of keeping in touch with him because he had given me a slight hope that there may be potential in the future. So on the monthly, regularly, I met him once a month. I would text him, we'd meet for coffee, we'd meet for lunch. And it was his opportunity to understand what I was doing with the magic while simultaneously me understanding how the company operated. And it was actually during the pandemic when he gave me a call about after 12 times of interviewing me and said, "Hey, Aurusa, I know the pandemic just started, and for lawyers listening in, force majeure became a huge clause that we needed to protect ourselves from. How can you join the team? I need you to come on board. We can discuss your title, your salary, whatever. Let me know if you can even make it happen." I said, "Hold that thought. I need to have another conversation. I will give you a call back." So I called my then boss at the Magic and said, "Hey, I have this offer on the table. What do you suggest?" And she said, "Take it, but negotiate it. Negotiate your title, negotiate your salary, negotiate your opportunity. I know it's a pandemic. Opportunities are limited, but you know your worth." And I think that's probably the wisest advice someone ever gave me. And so I ended up joining Orlando City Soccer and Orlando Pride, serving for both as their legal counsel on an independent contractor status.
Okay. How did it feel to get a full-time gig like that?
I can only say I got a full-time offer 2 weeks ago. So it's felt
great. How does it feel to be to have a full-time gig?
It felt great. Not only did he have 12 different moments where he sat with me and talked to me to interview me, he had an additional 9 months. Through the pandemic up until 2 weeks ago, I was still on my interview. I was trying to make myself very, very important and very crucial to the dynamic of the business. And thankfully I was able to, but I do have to say to anyone wanting to join into sports, even if there's no opportunity, you can create it. Your potential, your drive, your passion can help you create it. When people look to join sports, I know most of us look at the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, but it's okay to start elsewhere. And I'm so grateful that I now, everything I learned from the Magic, I can bring up to Orlando City because I'm working in a startup environment. I am helping the HR department grow. I am helping our academy division grow. I'm helping us become more efficient and creating efficiencies in the way we operate our businesses. And so everything I learned from corporate America, I'm bringing it into the startup world, which also leads me to say, there's so much opportunity and there's so much room for growth. As these other sports and leagues become more elevated and more popular, looking at just Angel City in LA, it's going to happen. And you too can do exactly what I did, where you make yourself important and needed by creating your position.
And you talked about opportunities because of how many opportunities there are in sports, matter whether it's in like big leagues or like NFL or small stuff. How much has the industry changed in sports and law since you first started way back at the University of Texas Austin to now? How much has that industry changed?
The industry has changed substantially. I can't remember when I was attending a game as a Longhorn, whether there was any political issues on the field. It would be surprising if there was. I know there was some back in the day. Muhammad Ali used to really use his platform, but it wasn't as prevalent as athletes today are using their platform. And I think as we've continued to grow and as technology has become more and more powerful, I think it has become almost more essential for sports to use their platform. And I say this because, like we talked about earlier, sports has been a constant in our lives, right? It's a sense of comfort. And I think when there's stuff going on in the outside world that we can't turn a blind eye to, whether it's Black Lives Matter or Asian Lives Matter or voting rights, whatever that may be. I think they are all issues that have now led athletes and teams and owners to realize their power within that platform. And I'm proud to say that we're seeing that change happen in front of us. The MLS created a Black Players for Change coalition that's working hand in hand with the league to address some of these issues. NWSL is leading the movement in voting, and it's exciting to see that change. As much as we're also seeing a change for equality. We think of sports as very male friendly. And I think that that's also changing. That narrative is changing. We're seeing more coaches that are females. We're seeing more referees that are females. We're seeing more athletes that are females, and they're getting equal weight in society. And hopefully eventually they're equally valued as well.
Yeah. In terms from an on-air perspective, which is what I do for the sports industry, that's also changing like crazy. What cameras we use, the type of editing system, how we present the news, it's all been changing, especially since the pandemic, where, you know, people can't even go to the games anymore. Broadcasters and radio play-by-play, they can't go to the games. So that's just constantly shifting. And, you know, speaking of the pandemic, when COVID first hit, how did that affect, you know, your path, your strategy into like going into this business?
It was nerve-wracking. I had my family laughs at me and they say the day you get married, your American Express credit card goes away. And they really thought I was going to live on it for another few years. And thankfully that's not the case anymore. But it was nerve-wracking. And so for all the students out there, like, don't stop believing. It's not easy. The pandemic has forced us to become creative. It's forced us to really network. But I will say it has never been easier to network. When I met the general counsel of Orlando Magic, it only happened because it was in person. When I became relevant to Orlando City, it's because I flew out in person. Today, you can network with a touch of an email, a time calendar, and a Zoom link. Like, it is that simple, so long as you stay relevant. And so I truly, truly, truly believe that opportunities will present themselves. I think technology is changing, meaning there's more innovation that's needed. So continue your education, get really good at something, and then find your way in.
Yeah, everything's constantly changing. You are always finding different opportunities at all times. It's unbelievable. But you're clearly not done yet. So, I mean, where do you go from here? What is next for you?
I had led myself to believe that I want to be a part of FIFA 2022. I had the opportunity in 2016 to visit Qatar's airport, and that was it, just the airport. And I knew that there was an importance coming to that part of the world. Often we always think of sports being very, very relevant to European countries and American countries, and often forget that sports like FIFA are hugely relevant to that part of the world, Latin America, South America, and I wanted to be a part of that platform. I personally joined sports because I wanted to bring countries together. I wanted to be a part of the change and bring humanities together. And so I have created this crazy idea of becoming an Olympic arbitrator and representing both Pakistan and the United States one day. So I, earlier this summer, started taking some Arabic classes while they have drifted off a little bit, have realized that there's a need for me to make myself important. The way I can make myself important is, one, learning the language, two, saying I'm a minority in the group, and three, I am great at my craft. And so I hope one day I will either be at the FIFA 2022. If not, the United States FIFA is coming 2026, and or the Olympics in 2028.
Look, with your work ethic, I'm pretty sure you'll get it done, no problem. Well, that's going to do it for my questioning, but we do have some questions from the people who are watching. So Maheen says, what advice do you have for recent graduates taking the bar exam and looking for jobs?
I have two. One, if you're taking the bar exam, try to see if you can take the universal bar exam. I personally believe the bar exam exists because it exists to limit opportunity in states. So it's very particular and niche. But try to make sure that see if you can get the universal bar exam and see what scores are needed in multiple states. The reason I say that is because today you can represent New York and work out of Florida, right? But what if you find a job in Florida that you now want to move here? You now have to take an additional bar because Florida doesn't have a separate bar exam. And so I would say look into that. If you want to go in-house, look into in-house counsel exceptions. Most states have these exceptions. I'm licensed in Wisconsin, never took the bar exam, but I'm an in-house counsel authorized lawyer and attorney in Florida. And so there's multiple avenues, and then don't lose hope. If you fail the first time, it's okay to fail. Take it again and keep going.
You know what you're talking about, so I'm gonna take your word for it. Are there any other questions from anybody watching? Okay, so that's. Oh wait, never mind. So Zach Khan says, "I've heard of the Asia backpacking tour really impacted your life. Can you elaborate on that?"
Zach Khan happens to also be my brother.
Oh,
Asking for a shout out for that.
I love the support.
Yes, it was very impactful, and I thank you every day for it, even though I don't say it in public. I think if anyone gets the opportunity, take advantage of the travel. The world has never been smaller. It's also never been closer and easily accessible. So when it is safe to do so, get out there if you can, because it will change your world.
Yeah, I mean, after hearing this, I definitely want to start traveling more abroad as much as possible. Is there anybody else on the stream that has any questions? Okay. Oh, here we go. IPN themselves are asking you, what are your tips on networking?
The first is it only takes one person to open the door for you. It doesn't take a world, it takes one. So really when you're looking, first look at someone who has what you aspire to have. And then form a true and balanced relationship with them, not one that is, hey, I need this, can you review my cover letter? Or can you forward my resume to so-and-so's table? Truly build a relationship of a mentor and mentee and have that individual invested in your life. And then it only takes one to validate you. Two, and this is what I still do to this day, and it helps me network because networking never stops. When you see an event happen in life, whether it's Tampa Bay Buccaneers winning the Super Bowl, or whether there's a tragedy, reach out to that person that you're trying to communicate with and either start with a happy occasion or start with your sympathies. Don't do it on a loss. That's never exciting. But if something tragic happens, like a retirement or whatever with the player, truly just reach out, have an authentic email that tells the person that's reading it, the email that one, you care and you're following up to date. And two, it sets you apart. It's not just a generic email. And they may not respond to you, right? So people are busy. I feel like we're busier today than we were just a year ago, right? There's no work-life balance anymore. The average work time has definitely increased in hours. And so be okay with not hearing back. And if you don't hear back, follow up in 2 months and say, hey, I know you couldn't respond to me, but here is an update on what I've been doing in the last time I sent my email. And I guarantee once they see you a second or third time, they're going to feel a little bit guilty for not responding and will reach out.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say is that the sports world is such a small world. Like, you're going to start meeting the same people over and over again. So if you start to have a good impression on them, they'll recommend you to somebody. And that's just how it works. You're just going to keep going. So that's why networking is really important, just to get your face out there. Okay, Zoya is going to ask you, when you were working 70 to 80 hours a week, how did you avoid a burnout?
Find a way to do something you love. My first thing when I wake up in the morning is me time. And that means I'm listening to NPRs up first, which sounds really depressing, but that's my way of getting connected to the world. And then when I come home, I have to have a hot meal. So whether that's us ordering in or me taking time to cook it, I need the hot meal. So during that hot meal time, it's my time to catch up with my family. My family is, as if you didn't notice already, is very needy in the sense of we talk all the time. So about 2 hours of my day is given to them to just catch up. I am at a distance, and in the community we were raised in, we grew up very closely. And so I use that personal time to really just focus on myself and my family and people who lift my spirits. And the last thing I would say is to avoid burnout, do the work you truly love doing. It makes it that much easier to continue to want to do it, even if it's at 2 a.m. and then wake up again at 6 a.m. the next morning to continue. If you love what you do, and it's not always easy to find, it makes the burnout less efficient. It doesn't take over your life.
Yeah, well said. Do we have any more questions? Going once, going twice, 3 times. Oh, it looks like we do. Okay, we do have more questions. So I can, but yeah, but I will say this. Speaking of burnout, in college, they always told me that don't do too much. Like as soon as you start doing too much, and that don't do more than you can handle. Because I think that's the most important thing. While sports is a really fun job, if you start doing way too much, then I think you're going to start feeling that burnout. So start doing what you're comfortable with, and if you feel like you can do more, then keep adding to it. So now Ilyan's going to ask, hi, thanks for sharing your experiences. What is the number one trait your organization looks for in potential employees?
Great question. I think one is education, not where you went, not what experiences you had, but what you learned from those experiences. I think you have to be really good at your job before anything else will even matter. When it comes to soft skills, I think being quick-witted. In sports, you have to think at the drop of a hat. You really have to be quick to your feet, and you have to be creative, solution-oriented. I know it's easy to say, oh no, this went wrong, but your job should be, how can I address it? Or this is what we're going to do to fix it. And this is how we will proceed. So just being quick, creative, but also knowing your work product. You have to be the expert in the room. So really knowing that piece.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, especially when you're applying for jobs. When you do interviews, they always ask you, okay, what makes you stand out? How can you help our company in a way that somebody else couldn't? And I think that's what's the most important thing. So you always want to try and be creative, because especially in a world like this, it's crazy where anybody can do whatever they want in milliseconds. So it's really difficult to stay ahead of the curve in being as creative. Okay, we do have time for just one more question. So let's get to it. All right, it is IPN. So how do you create a work-life balance?
Would it be horrible for me to say it doesn't exist? It's hard for it to exist. I won't say it doesn't exist. It is hard to find the balance. Staying very efficient and prioritizing. So I feel like the one thing I took away from Grey's Anatomy, I guess is full circle for me, is learning how to triage. Defining priorities. So high priority, medium priority, low priority, and what can I outsource and delegate to someone else? I'm one person, so I can't handle the world. I can't solve everyone's problems overnight. And so the one thing I try to do is triage work. But that also means I triage life, right? So if I need to pack for movers, I need to make sure I'm not having dinner plans that night, right? And I think scheduling things out, being on top of organization really, really helps with that balance. And then the one thing I learned, and I didn't say this through my piece on the magic, was I was working in sports, but basketball is my favorite sport. And it was hard for me to separate my work life from my home life, because I would leave work and I'd come home to the Dallas Mavericks on television. And it was a very unique struggle that I had. And I realized then, not only did the MLS allowed me to be more creative, but it allowed me to finally separate work from life. Because now I can come home and still have sports in the background and not think about, what is the other team doing? Can we do that too? Are they allowed to do that? Are we allowed to do that, right? Like those were the thoughts that were going on in my head, and it went from being fun to being work, and without me realizing. And so finding a way to separate your passions, even when it's between work and life.
All right, well said. Again, if you can't see that, more questions, connect with your speakers, please email them at florida@iponline.net. Yeah, I can't tell you, thank you so much for attending the event, for all of you watching. Aurusa, man, such an incredible time talking with you, such an enjoyment talking to you. I want to thank IPN for giving me this opportunity to be able to connect with a person like this. She's basically someone I aspire to be in terms of work ethic and achievements, and she's just getting started. Yeah, thank y'all so much. Thank you to Samir and Khadija for dealing with me this entire time. Hopefully I did a good job for you guys. But yeah, that's going to be it for us. Again, if you want to follow anybody, please continue on the Smiley Professionals Network, find their website. And if you have any more questions, you can connect with them. Take care, guys.
Thank you, Shaji. You were awesome.
No, thank you.